Well, welcome back to this special editions on Take a Stand. We're here today with four powerful people talking about Project 25. We was out on vacation to September, but we felt that people needed to hear about Project 2025. So I want to thank all of my guests that is here today. I'm going to let them introduce themselves, starting with Mrs. Barnes, and we'll go all the way over. Again, I want to thank you. This is Take a Stand. Whatever is said today is the views of the host and the guest, not the show producer. Again, we're here to just talk about Project 2025. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi. Well, my name is Kenyette Barnes. I'm a registered federal and state lobbyist. I'm stationed right here in Chicago, but I cut my teeth in Atlanta, Georgia, under the Gold Dome. And my focus right now is to really help people to understand what is Project 2025, what does the mandate mean, what are some things beyond the talking points that we need to know as we prepare to go into this election cycle.
Thank you. Next person. Reverend Diana.
Hello, everybody. It's good to be back. My name is Reverend Diane Dougherty, and hopefully a lot of people that were on the show are listening now or will listen. I am very interested in this topic because as a Catholic priest, very few people know or understand the role of Catholicism in developing Project 25. And as I say, and I really believe it, these are not religious people. They are conning religious people. So I hope we'll get into a conversation about what is Christian nationalism and how is this, how are they hijacking people of faith? Glad to be here.
Thank you. I don't see who's next. I don't see you right now because I'm looking at another page. But you can come on.
I'm Richard Rose, former Atlanta NAACP president, now CEO of Communities United for Justice, still in the civil rights business. And we have some serious issues, which include Project 2025 facing us, and it deserves a proper conversation and countering. Glad to be with these guests. I didn't know Reverend Dougherty, but I know Gerald and Kenyette. So good to be with you.
Thank you. I'm Attorney Gerald Griggs. I am the president of the Georgia State Conference of the NAACP and the president of the Atlanta NAACP, freedom fighter, civil rights attorney, criminal defense attorney, son of Atlanta. Proud to be here to have this conversation in our political discourse about Project 2025 and the pitfalls that belay this policy initiative for all communities, but particularly for African-American communities.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. Before we go, I want to thank you guys for coming. And we got from attorneys to NAACP to lobbyists to ministers, and we got Republicans. We got the whole platform right here. So I want to thank you guys. Let me start with this. When you're talking about Project 2025. When you post on some outlets, they come back and say that it's false information. Attorney Griggs, so you just left. So is this false information being put out?
No, it's not false information being put out. It is a manifesto on leadership that was convened and put together by the Heritage Foundation. It's 922 pages of policy initiatives that are the template for leadership for the next conservative president. It literally says that on the guide. So it goes from housing and urban development to education to the offices of Department of Civil Rights and the Department of Justice. So, I mean, it's not false information. I think what people are doing is trying to diminish the criticisms of this policy manifesto. I myself have read 500 of the 922 pages, and nothing in it is false. And so I think that it's important for people to understand and read for themselves before they believe the misinformation that is rampant on these platforms.
Okay. I'm going to go to, yes, Reverend Diana.
I would like people to know that you can get a copy of it. Just download the PDF. It's right online. And the first thing you'll see is the number of people that were in the Trump administration. I think there's 45 that have written it.
Okay, good information. I'm going to go to Kenya on this one. We're going to dive right in.
Let's go.
Let me say this. Could you talk about how they're going to raise taxes for the working class?
So I want to ask your question, but I also want to kind of talk a little bit about what Gerald stated, because he's absolutely right. I think I'm probably at page 920. So it is a robust document, and within that document are a number of federal agencies, including the IRS. And I think what's happening here is that a couple of things. What Project 2025 really is like it is a mandate. It's not a bill, it's not a law. So when people say that it's going to raise taxes, these are all proposals. And what the proposals are really focused on as far as the tax code is to give a lower tax bracket for what's called capital gains. So that's the biggest part of the tax reform, is this capital gains. So what is capital gains? Capital gains usually is lots and lots and lots of money for the most affluent 1% of our population. And right now, a person making $50,000 a year pays a greater percentage of their taxes than a person who's making $100 million a year. And what this new proposal would do is to further cut taxes for those individuals at the highest tax brackets. So when we talk about tax cuts are coming from capital gains primarily. And then you will find a disparity between the people who make $50,000 and below, and those who make $1 million and above. So that's really what's happening with the taxes. And if I can simplify it, we can go band by band, or what's going to happen with band 4, band 5. That, I believe, is just not something that your listeners are really going to be overly interested in. What they need to know is that the people who make the most money in this country, the affluent, the people who, if you read that list of contributors to Project 2025 are in there, are going to see the greatest tax cuts. And I think that is something that our working class people in rural Georgia, in Atlanta, in northern Georgia, Black, white, Latina, Asian, need to be aware of.
You know, before I go, let me go to Mr. Rose, and I want you to piggyback off the first talking about Project 2025, Mr. Rose.
So sure, this is serious business. It deals with 20 different federal agencies.
Yes.
All the way from Defense to Department of Veteran Affairs. And let me just remind listeners and viewers that this was written by the Heritage Foundation, which produced the Supreme Court that we have, that we know rules against people. The Heritage Foundation and the Federal Society, in my opinion, are two organizations that are enemies of the people. These are people who tend toward oligarchies. They want the few to rule, and a few, and that they pay no taxes for it. As mentioned earlier, the Trump tax cuts are the reason that we have such high inflation now. We cannot get over it. The deficit that was run up under this previous administration was more than the combined deficits of every other previous president. And that says a lot. But and Project 25 is just another way to continue toward a path where common people will have no input, no say in what goes on in their communities, because it will be managed and dictated by Washington, which will then be full of those people from the Heritage Foundation. So it's a clear and present danger to democracy as we know it, as I see it.
Okay. Reverend Diana, I'm going to let you go and come in, and then we'll go to these bullet points. You want to talk about with the Project 2025 as they discuss?
One of the scariest perspectives for me, because I worked in the Catholic Church for so long, is the dismantling of the administrative state. It will become like a house of cards where everything that has been built up, health, education, welfare, Veterans Affairs, all of the wonderful people that keep democracy alive will be dismissed in large portion. Once that's dismissed, they will figure out who to save and who not to save. When they talk about the border, the migrant issue, we will see migrant camps. We will have individuals living in families. They may even be legal citizens, taken away from their families and sent to those camps, or put on a plane and sent someplace else. And there will be no checks and balances where we as a people will have an opportunity to shift or change those decisions. That is scary. We lose our voice, we lose our human rights, we lose our civil rights.
Okay, I'm going to go to Miss Barnes first, and we're going to talk about the misinformation of Project 25, and then we'll get back on. Miss Barnes.
Thank you so much. So one of the things that I love about this panel is that it seems like each of us are sort of tackling this from our own personal and professional perspective. And when you really think about this, although I know that there is almost an exploitation of the Catholic Church and the Judeo-Christian belief systems in this, Reverend Diane said it much better than I can. So what I want to speak about is some of the stuff that I've kind of been doing on an ad hoc basis, and that is literally addressing some of the misinformation. As a contract lobbyist, I often work with C3 and C4 agencies, and these are nonprofit agencies of different IRS status. And one of the things that has happened in the past week or two is that people are sharing information that is absolutely false about the Heritage Foundation's 501c3 status. And what has happened is it has actually caused a juggernaut and a backlog of phone calls and email and just a lot of wasted energy attempting to attack the IRS for the Heritage Foundation while the IRS is actually still processing tax returns of people who probably need the money more. And so the other thing too is that a lot of the misinformation, and someone mentioned social media, is that the misinformation is spreading. But there are people who are consistently sharing the truth, and they're consistently telling people, wait a minute, stop sharing this, stop sharing this. And it almost becomes a game of whack-a-mole, because in addition to actually going through Project 2025 in its entirety and attempting to put this in digestible chunks, now you're dealing with the misinformation that you're hearing. So the one thing I would like to say for the listeners is there are people who are doing this work. There are people in these spaces. Myself, Attorney Griggs, we have worked together for almost a decade on some of these issues that are outlined in Project 2025. And so has former President Rose and I. But the reality is that there are people out there, and the number of people who are political operatives, who are lobbyists, who are attorneys, who work in these spaces, listen to us. At this point, I'm not gatekeeping, but I'm gatekeeping because the stakes are too high. Listen to the people who have a track record of understanding what this is, because trust me, the other side loves the conspiracy theories. They love them because they know that it's going to keep people engaged and spinning their wheels while they continue to do what they do. I also want to talk a little bit about what is Project 2025. It's a mandate. My dear friend Gerald said it's a manifesto. I actually like that better. It's a mandate. It's not a bill. It's not an executive order. It is none of that. However, reading through it and looking at the way each of those agencies will be attacked, I can pull about 100 to 200 pieces of legislation, both federal and state, out of that one document. So that becomes a concern. The concern becomes about the electoral process and how we get past all of the misinformation and the wasted energy and realize, learn who your county commissioners are, learn who's on your ballot, who are your school board presidents, who are your judges, because trust me, many people will vote for a judge until you got to stand in front of them. Then you wonder, why in the world is this person on the bench? Well, because you didn't vote against them. And so that's what I want to talk about. That's my perspective in this, is that we got to get past the misinformation and we got to get down to what it is. And we got to get people on the streets to the polls.
Okay, thank you. Attorney Griggs, let's talk about the cutting of the Social Security. Could you kind of dive into that let's talk about that.
So one of the policy initiatives outlined in Project 2025, and again, it's 922 pages, is the trimming down and the cutting of the social parachute, social network, because they consider them entitlements. And so they want to cut Social Security, they want to cut Medicaid and Medicare, they want to cut entitlement programs because they believe that it builds some type of belief in our community that people don't have to work and people don't have to earn a living to provide services. And when actually Social Security and Medicaid, Medicare, people were placing the money into the system while they were working, and now they are entitled to these funds as they have, aged out and now are not longer working or have some sort of disability. And so Project 2025 wants to gut that. They want to remove the entitlement programs and to revamp the federal government. One of the scariest pieces, and I think Reverend Diane talked a little bit about this, is the parsing of a third of the federal employees. And so what they are saying is, this is the deep state. And so we need to get rid of a third of the federal government's, civil employees. These are people who are career employees in the federal government. They're the ones that keep the machines running. They're the ones that keep everything going. They're apolitical. But Project 2025 wants to target them, remove them, and replace them with whoever's elected president from the conservative party in those jobs so that they are loyal and they will carry out their policy initiatives. So these are some really disturbing things that they're trying to do with Project 2025. And again, as Kenyette has said, it's not law yet, but you can see that if there is an election and a conservative candidate is elected, this is the mandate from which they will be securing their policy initiatives. So you got to make sure you understand what this manifesto is.
Do any of you guys want to, Reverend Diana?
You hit the nail on the head. This is what they call a bloodless coup. I don't know if you've heard that people talk about a bloodless coup. You don't have to shed any blood. You don't have to have any violence. You just remove people from those places and you put in people that have absolutely no idea what they're doing. So let's say you have someone like that in your Social Security office that is supposed to send out checks. You think you're going to get your check? You think your Medicaid, the hospital is going to be paid? This is going to impact every single system that serves the public. Veterans benefits, they won't even have your name.
And let's be clear, they're not shy about it. In this document, this mandate says taking the reins of government.
Yes.
The reins of government. And one, I saw one guy being interviewed, and he said it would be a bloodless coup if the left will allow it.
Yes.
Mike
Johnson. Mike Johnson. That's right.
Wow.
And so to back up what Reverend Diane is saying, what former President Rose is saying, we need to understand that they are outlining what they're going to do in real time. And if you want to look at what an institution can look like under Project 2025, look at the Postal Service. Look at how delayed your mail service is because of the individual that's been placed over the top of the Postal Service who has no idea what he's doing. And so, like she said, like Mr. Rose has said, this is the beginning of taking the reins of power, stripping what they call the deep state, which is nothing but the federal government, and reforming it into something that fits their agenda, their narrative, and it will only benefit the super wealthy. I think the biggest trick that's been pulled is to try to divide everybody under the 1% to have us fighting each other and not watching what's happening, behind the curtain with our systems. Now, I'm not saying all the systems are great, but to wholesalely remove certain systems, like another thing we need to talk about, the wholesale gutting of the Department of Education. It's actually, I believe, on page 9 of the part on the Department of Education. They're going to cut the entire Department of Education. If you know anything about that, that's where you get your federal funding from for the programs that are implemented in public schools. And so they're going to gut that.
I got the whole list here that we're going to talk about. And like I say, we might have to do another show. Mrs. Barnes had her hand up. You want to piggyback on something on that?
I probably was just like, just moving around. What I wanted to say, and I think you're going to go down the list of the agencies. I want to talk about how this is having real world implications. So I have an 18-year-old college student. She's starting school next month. And she is having conversations with her friends about long-acting hormonal birth control. So you now have 18, 19, 20, 30-year-old young women who are trying to get long-acting birth control, IUDs, implants, because they are concerned. In addition, there is an entire kind of sub-community of young men who are trying to get vasectomies. So this generation is absolutely in play because they are aware. This generation, Generation X, these kids graduate. These were the pandemic children. They started their high school career during the pandemic. These kids are primed and they're ready and they are not playing games. So what I think that Project 2025 is trying to do is to really disempower that voting bloc, because it is a very powerful voting bloc. Just today, the election website for the Secretary of State in Illinois crashed. Crashed. It's like, wait a minute, what? And everyone has their theories about why it happened. A reliable source told me it was just the traffic, because the website has never seen that type of traffic at one time in the history of the state of Illinois. So these kids are registering to vote. People who have never registered to vote in their life are registering to vote. We have had record voter registration in Illinois since Barack Obama's campaigns. So what this is telling me is that people are scared. When you look at this, it's absolutely dystopian. So for me, as someone who works directly in the federal and state legislatures, I look at Project 2025, and all I see is how many pieces of legislation could come out of this and completely just gut the culture of the United States that we know today. When they say make America great again, it means make America white and cis hetero male again.
I like that.
Last comment, and I'm gonna stop talking because I can go on and on and on. But my brother talked about the public schools. One of the things that's happening in the public schools that I read, and I had to literally just put it down, is that trans and non-binary students will not have any federal protections under the Disability Act. I mean, excuse me, under the Anti-Discrimination Act. They will not have protections. And we know when we look at rates of suicide, rates of mental health, LGBTQ plus students have a much higher rate of that. And a lot of it is due to bullying. And now kids are being told that they have to use their sex on their birth certificate. They can't use they as a pronoun. The parents have to, it's insane. It's
yeah. Let me go to Attorney Griggs. Do you think by Vice President Harris coming out yesterday running for president, do you think we have an opportunity to stop Project 2025?
Well, let me just say this. As a president of the Georgia State Conference, I can't comment directly on candidates, but what I can say is policy is important. And if this policy is implemented, you will see, as Kenyette just said, a wholesale change in the culture of America. I'll give you an example like she just talked about with the Department of Education and LGBTQIA students. In the Department of Education, they would end the Office of Civil Rights because there's a civil rights component in the Department of Education. They would move that to the Department of Justice, which they're going to cut in half. They're going to end civil rights with regard to race and gender, and they're going to focus solely on immigration and mass deportations through the Justice Department. So you're going to see deportation camps, similar to what many Americans saw in the 40s with the Japanese internment camps and what we saw at the beginning of the last administration, one previous to the Biden administration, with the kids in cages. We're going to see those on American soil. And so I think whichever candidate is elected, in this presidential campaign, will have the ability to either implement Project 2025 or stop it in its tracks. And we can only look as far as what's happening on our Supreme Court. When you allow the Heritage Foundation and the Federalist Society to have absolute power, you end up with a president with absolute immunity.
Okay. Let me ask Diana, and we're going to try to keep it so we can get to everybody. Reverend Diana, let's talk about this school, the Project 2025. You said that it has already began in Atlanta public schools. Could you kind of hit bases on that?
One of the initiatives has to do with big money taking over school systems. And for the longest time, I worked with a lot of you on the Opportunity School District. And we found out that huge donors they were from ALEC, were pumping money into the Atlanta public schools, trying to break them up and privatize it. They didn't really get very far necessarily, but they did they did support the charter program. Now, the charter program is a good program. It's not bad because charter schools are public schools. However, the flip of that is what you can't see behind the scenes are the huge amounts of money that are given through the system to charter schools. And the problem with charter schools is that they don't have to follow what public schools offer. Well, how does that translate? I went to Guatemala. In Guatemala, the public schools only have the poorest of the poor children and teachers that will dedicate themselves to teaching. These people have no books, they have no money, they have very, very poor schools. I mean, you think of public schools in the South for Blacks in the from the 20s to the 50s. Same thing. How did they do that here? They went into this system, threw in the charter system. They gave oodles of money to start, quote unquote, private Christian schools. And now we have in Atlanta and throughout Georgia, multiple funds, hundreds of millions of dollars for Christian private Catholic schools, where a parent can pull their money out of the public system and take it to the school of their choice. However, if you're in a Christian or a Catholic school, you cannot be gay. They don't have to follow discrimination laws. They don't have to receive any people with disabilities. So what does that do? It leaves the public school system with the poorest of the children, with the poorest of the families, and without funding. Very clever. This is just one of many efforts that they are making. So they've broken it down pretty much here in Atlanta. But again, they're trying to do it wholesale.
Okay, let me ask you, and then we can move. I had a interesting conversation with another party, and this were their words. Project 2025, the concern, it only affect the brown, the Black, the minorities, the Mexicans. Do you agree with that, Mr. Rose?
I think obviously that's the intention, because throughout the document, all 922 pages, they talk about reversing diversity, equity, and inclusion. And you know, it's clearly the structure of racism that has been built in America, where we seek to tear down that structure, to open it up for all of us. It seeks to strengthen that structure and not only remain in place, but be stronger in place. And you know what they want to do with labor, for example, they want to reverse what they call the DEI revolution, and to eliminate racial classification. And they always throw up red herrings like stop funding critical race theory, as if critical race theory was ever a concept that I never learned. I'm finished. I've been to graduate school, but they taught it in law school. It had nothing to do with the rest of us. But they keep throwing out these. They put a false premise out, and when you start with a false premise, the conclusion has to be false. Right. Otherwise, it's the accident. And so they continue throw up red herrings, throw up scare tactics in order to gain the support of those people who don't look like us. Okay. And you know, I remember those the voucher system has been in place for a while. They've been trying to move that money out. We used to call them segregation academies all over.
That's right.
So that's what they've tried to do. You remember one of my first battles as president of Atlanta NAACP was against the Opportunity School District bill, which was going to do that. The result of that in Arizona, which has voucher passed. They got a voucher program passed. It has decimated the funding in the Department of Education in the state of Arizona. Is nothing good coming out of the continued segregation and discrimination and oppression of people of color and people without means.
Now let me. Someone sent me this question, and I'm going to give this to Attorney Griggs. Did Project 2025 begin in the state of Georgia this year with the recertification of the Medicaid and the Peach Care Kids Insurance Program?
No, Project 2025 has not gone into effect anywhere. It is a conservative leadership mandate that outlines the policies. Now, there have been some attempts at these type of policies before. That's what Mr. Rose was talking about with the Opportunity School District, the voucher program they tried to pass here in Georgia that failed, or previously the private school initiatives that came out of the decision of Brown versus Board of Education when they said with all deliberate speed, and they've been with all deliberate speed in the opposite direction. So some of the policies have been implemented, but not in a wholesale way. So no, Peach Care is not a part of that. But I would also add, when we're having this conversation about Project 2025, I think it's apropos a quote that Lyndon Baines Johnson always used: the easiest way to convince poor individuals to do whatever you want is to convince them that they're better than someone else. So, this will affect not only minorities, but it will affect our lower class brothers and sisters who happen to be white. So be focused on the brown and black scourge while the government is reshaping your lives and taking your money. It's the oldest trick in the book, divide and conquer. And this manifesto will do that, because when you look up and all of your rights have been stripped away and only the 1% are benefiting, you're going to recognize that this was a process to divide us based on race. Because as Mr. Rose just stated, critical race theory is only taught in law school. I'm gonna let y'all a little secret. I didn't even take it in law school. So that's how nuanced that conversation is. Critical race theory is not taught in K through 12. It's not taught in most of our institutions of higher learning. It's not taught in the state of Georgia at all. And right. So to have a conversation and say we need to end critical race theory, we need to end diversity, equity, inclusion. Let's just change the words back to what diversity, equity, inclusion really was: affirmative action. They just changed the words. And so they are trying to strip us back to either 1950 or 1850 through this 60-year plan. It's between a 60 to 100-year plan to reverse all the gains that have happened due to the civil rights generation.
Okay, let me go to let me go to Diana, and then I go to Ms. Barnes. Let me ask you, how would this affect the single mothers?
Oh, how much time do we have? We can go department by department.
I want it real short.
I got you.
I want to go to Reverend Diana.
I got you. So we can probably look at this from several departments. We'll start with Department of Health and Human Services. Black mothers, black birthing mothers have the highest mortality rate of all developed countries in the world. Our death rates at birth eclipse some developing countries, and that is deplorable. And one of the things that has happened is that the DEI training that everyone's trying to strip away, the implicit bias training that people are trying to strip away, that is taught in medical schools. That is taught to aspiring obstetrician and gynecologists, labor and delivery nurses, midwives, people who are in the birthing space. This is what Project 2025, one of the things that Project 2025 is going to strip away is the ability for birthing professionals to actually learn how not to be racist and how not to allow their biases to adversely impact birthing people. As a person who has given birth on 3 occasions, I can tell you there are belief systems that women who look like me, mothers who look like me, tend to be a little bit more histrionic when we're having labor pains, and we do it to get attention. And then the next belief is we have a higher pain tolerance. So do we have a higher pain tolerance, or are we just being histrionic and dramatic, or what is going on? Project 2025 would strip that ability to actually have those deep conversations with birthing professionals in medical schools, nursing schools, and schools of midwifery. Next, let's go to the Department of Education. We talked about that. You're talking about the IEP system, the 504 system. These type of systems are put into place to help students with disabilities to get the services that they need. What Project 2025 wants to do is to gut the Department of Education and to really reframe these into the private sector. Okay, well, your child is struggling with ADHD or autism. Hey, go to a private psychiatrist and let them deal with it. And then they give your son or your daughter the drugs they needed, and they come back to school and they perform. But there's no cohesion. What stripping away and guiding the Department of Education will do is it will create pitfalls for our most vulnerable students. It will take away English as a second language. It will take away disability services or differently able services. It will take away things like ASL interpreters. It will take away ASL interpreters in school, during SAT. So I can go on and on and on and on. And as far as Department of Health and Human Services, the way that, and I want to be super careful about kind of injecting my own personal bias into this next statement, but what they're attempting to do with family court litigation is dystopian. They are literally saying that children are better in a home with their married parents despite abuse.
Okay.
That's what Project 2025 is doing.
Okay. Thank you. Reverend Diane, you want to jump on in there? Tell me before we go, how is this Project 2025 going to affect the single mothers?
It's going to affect single mothers and single women.
There you go.
I mean, it's anyone who's single, because this is a Christo-fascist framework. And people who are single are looked on with suspect. You know, I was in the convent for 25 years, and it just dawned on me as all this was going on, why did we have to wear habits? So we could be identified as single women.
Right.
And if you look at the underlying principle of all of this, what really is scary to me is this belief system in which we all are either valued or not valued. If we're not valued, we don't have to have health, education, and welfare. Doesn't make a difference if there are people that are lost, deported, homeless, sent on a plane, going to someplace else, or die. It doesn't make a difference, because we will not be the class that is quote unquote saved. But I'll tell you what, our children will be the next workforce, low wage, low paid workforce that will build their idea of what they believe makes America great.
Okay. Richard Rose, let's talk about, Mr. Rose, let's talk about the banning of Black studies in all public universities. How would this affect the Black kids that's going to college?
So it would take us back 20 to 30 years, because that's where we were before, where we didn't know the African part of American history was never taught. I grew up in Memphis, Tennessee. I didn't learn that a Black man created the blood bank system until I was in college. I was at Clark College. You know, we didn't know. What we knew about was Jackie Robinson and Marian Anderson, but we just didn't have a full idea. We didn't know that the locomotive with the real McCoy. We didn't, Benjamin Banneker. African-American history is American history, and this will just take us back. We have to continue to speak out and every opportunity we can to talk about African history, American history. We got to help HBCUs so they can be a repository for Black history and experts in Black history. We can't sit around and wait on it to happen. We got to fight it, and then we got to have alternative ways to educate the populace. And white children need to know about the contributions of Black history. They need to know Charles Drew. Without Charles Drew, we wouldn't have the blood system we have today around the world, not just in America, but around the world. So I think we have to get busy. We have to have conversations like these to remind us that as a gentleman said to me in 2015, Gerald and I and Charles Steele had a press conference talking about Confederate monuments. He called the NAACP office. He said, very polite, he said, Mr. Rose, what y'all got to understand is that the Civil War never ended.
That's right.
And we are reminded of that every day.
Wow. Wow. Attorney Griggs, they talking about defund Homeland Security and the FBI. Chime in on that for me.
So again, they are framing this as, systems of law enforcement are attacking citizens, and so they must be defunded. And so they want to gut the Department of Homeland Security and reform it into a deportation force. And then they want to strip the FBI of its law enforcement capabilities and assist in the deportation force. So what's happening here is, as Kenyette has said, as Richard has said, as Reverend Diane has said, we are seeing the structural reformation of white supremacy in real time in America. And we are seeing that they are going to create a lower class, which will be the economic engine that drives this new America. But it's not a new way of doing things. It's actually the old way. And so all it took was a few group of people to get in a room and say, okay, we're going to enslave a whole class of people and make them the economic drivers. That was the 18th century. And so now we find ourselves in the same situation where we know the Black folks don't want to work like they used to work. So we're going to enslave or make low-wage earners of the brown folks or deport them, whichever one comes first. And we're going to use our new law enforcement to be the ones that keep order, law and order, similar to the slave catchers they had in the past. And so by defunding the FBI and reforming the FBI, they can create that force that is beholden to the chief executive and him alone. And they already have in mind whom they want that chief executive to be. And so we have to be clear on the time that we are in right now, because our children and our grandchildren will ask the question, what did you do during this time when this was happening? It takes people of good conscience to come together and recognize this is not about race, even though it's put together by a bunch of racists. This is about power, and power concedes nothing without what? Force and a demand. And so we have to be the Frederick Douglasses of our time to make sure that this doesn't happen again, and we don't see a reformation of the American system similar to what we saw in The Handmaid's Tale. This is our time.
I have conversations with the young people sometime, and they don't have a clue about Project 2025. They don't want to vote. They say it won't affect them. But right now I'm looking, it will affect the single mothers that's getting the SNAP program, the food stamps, the Section 8. Hear me, you guys, the SNAP program, Section 8, food stamps. So how do we educate our people, Attorney Griggs, on they got to understand what is at stake here?
I think we have to remind them of what 2016 to 2020 looked like. I know myself, I was outside every single day. Richard was outside every single day. Kenyette was outside with me every single day. I'm sure Miss Diane was at some of the protests. And so we had to go back 40 years in our organizing to prevent what was coming. And now it's coming back. And again, I think the young people and the folks who say that they don't do politics, well, if you don't do politics, politics sure is about to start doing you. So no SNAP, no welfare, your kids are going to be privatized. You're not going to have the ability to not die during childbirth. I mean, these are all things that are going to happen. There's not going to be an FBI to come into the South to tell the racist people to not mess with the brown and black folks. We're going to see internment camps. You're going to see America in a way that many of us haven't seen in 100 years. And that was thankful because of the work of our ancestors. So for the young folks who say, well, it's not going to be that bad, give it a try. I'm not going to give it a try because I know what's coming. I've seen the weaponization of the criminal justice system. And if you think that's bad, Project 2025 is the weaponization of the criminal justice system on steroids and on fentanyl. Speaking of fentanyl, who's going to come to protect you against fentanyl if the DEA is defunded? Again, y'all need to pay attention to what's happening. Don't focus on the buzzwords. DEI, critical race theory, diversity is the big bad boogeyman. None of that stuff is what they're actually doing. What they're actually doing is reforming their economic engine to take care of the 1%, and everybody else, you're on your own.
You're on your own. And the other thing I do want to say about that, it always feels good to get on Gerald's trajectory when he starts speaking. Just a little history lesson. This is exactly how Jim Crow came about.
That's right.
Crow laws. First of all, Jim Crow was not a federal law. A lot of people believe that Jim Crow was a federal law. It was not. Jim Crow was what was called de facto national legislation. That's what something that I actually wrote a dissertation about. And what it is that you get a block of states with the same culture and you just start to pass the same laws so that people can't easily skip borders. But yeah, Jim Crow started just like this. It was a manifesto. It was a manifesto based on the fact that the enslaved Africans were now free men and free women. And there were a whole lot of people with a whole lot of agency. And we didn't want these people to have all this agency. So let's go and make up more laws to further imprison them. So we have seen this before.
Oh, wow.
And you keep, and in order to keep them controlled, they created laws like vagrancy. Vagrancy was a law created to arrest and imprison Black men and women who were seeking employment. So they couldn't leave Mr. John and try to get a job somewhere else, because while they were trying to get that job, they could be arrested and sent back to Mr. John's place free without wages whatsoever. Pay attention to some of the small words that people say. They mean big things. Like on the other night at the presidential debate, Black jobs.
Yes.
Those two words speaks volumes of what the objective is for Project 2025.
And notice what's happening at the Supreme Court. It's just like what Kenyette said. In order for Jim Crow to become the law of the land, they needed a legal theory to attach itself to. You can see it working in real time right now. Supreme Court just said it's okay for the states to punish the unhoused, the uncamped, or the vagrants. Right. Again, we are watching history replay itself in real time. And the question you have to ask yourself, just like after Reconstruction was the backlash which brought on Jim Crow, just like after the Civil Rights Movement was the backlash which brought on the war on poverty, the war on crime, the war on drugs, which was nothing but a war on Black folks and mass incarceration. We are in the third Reconstruction. We are in the middle of a backlash. And typically in history, this is when we lose. But hopefully by educating everyone, we will not lose, because what they want to happen is for you to be overwhelmed by all the things that are happening, to disconnect, to throw away your right to vote, and to allow this to happen, this bloodless coup.
Now, let me ask you,
let me say this, and remind people how, what we're talking about with legislation and the Justice Department. It was in 1857, the Supreme Court approved separate but equal, which continued until recently. If you saw the movie Hidden Figures, the reason to Roger Henson's character had to go a mile and a half to use the restroom is because Woodrow Wilson in the 1900s, 1910s, resegregated federal employment, and that lasted until the 60s.
And to go into that same conversation, Richard always tells this story. What movie was screened in the White House, which was the beginning of the continuation of the propaganda, Birth of a Nation, which at that point was the seminal motion picture. So I see we're going to shift to media, but we have to focus on the propaganda that always comes before the change. And so we are watching it in real time. I'm watching CNN shift in real time to a person that they were allegedly demonizing, who still has 4 open cases, 1 that he has to be sentenced for, and 3 that he has to be tried for, shifting their messaging to now this person's a hero, even though we haven't seen the medical reports to show what actually happened. So you have to open your eyes, put on your thinking caps, use the common sense that you have right now, because in a minute you're not going to have, because they're not going to educate your children, not going to tell them about Black history, not going to tell them about any other history other than this is what we want y'all to know. And you know, George Washington chopped down the cherry tree, but he wasn't a slave owner, that kind of stuff. And so we need to be aware of what's happening. And yes, the media is complicit in it, because they will put forward a narrative that's strong enough to change people's minds.
Let me ask Reverend Diane this. Let's talk about the media, because some media outlets, they say they refer as the former president as the president, and Joe Biden is Joe Biden. Let's talk about the media, Reverend Diana. Let's talk about that, Reverend Diana.
Well, my whole family, the kids in my whole family, I should say, are Trumpites. It just breaks my heart. They're very poor, uneducated, don't have a nickel to rub together because they never saved. And Trump is a strong man, a hero. And so I ask them, and of course their children are the same. I have great nieces and nephews now. The media is something that's in their ears, in their eyes, in their mouths all day long. And when I interrupt that, they don't like it. I make it very, very uncomfortable. So when I think about media, I think about what can I do to let them know they're living in a glass bubble? And Trump doesn't care anything about them. Their children are going to be the next low-wage workforce.
And that's important. I think that, you know, and Diane, you mentioned that maybe 4 times in our conversation, and I think it's something that we have to really look at. When you have an oligarch, when you have a system where the power base is concentrated, everyone else becomes a workforce. And when you look at what's happening, they want to gut AP programs. They want to gut college. Now you can't, colleges can't get federal funding because of Project 2025 if they focus on diversity in sports. If they have, girl, you need to read it. This is why I need y'all to follow my page, because I'm talking about, it's gonna get good, girl. Yes. Yeah, things like diversity in sports or a focus on recruiting female athletes and transgender athletes is enough to get your federal funding stripped. And a lot of colleges, especially state universities, rely very heavily on the federal student aid in order to just operate. So we're talking Georgia State, University of Georgia. I'm here in Chicago, so University of Illinois, Chicago. all of these institutions, and yes, even the private ones, Northwestern, up the street from me, University of Chicago, down the street from me, all of these institutions rely on federal money. And the Department of Education, that is also on the chopping block too. So I hear you about your young people. Whenever I hear young people saying, oh, well, this is great, I'm like, are you planning to go to college? Are you planning to do anything? Are you planning to do anything?
I'm gonna go to Attorney Griggs, and I'm gonna go down to Reverend Diana and go to Richard Rose on this. How is this going to benefit the veterans and their benefits, their entitlements, and the homeless? Will the veterans' benefits be cut under Project 2025?
Absolutely. And so for individuals that say that they salute the veterans, they want to make sure their lives are better, they're going to gut the Veterans Administration. They're going to cut the benefits. They're going to make it more difficult through red tape to get what these individuals who are heroes, who have served their country. My father was a veteran. My grandfather was a veteran. But they want to use the flag and use the military, but not fund the care for the veterans. And so I think that all of those who served this country should be appalled at what is in this document, this 922-page manifesto of fascism. And this is how it starts. This is how it started in Germany in the 30s, which ended with the concentration camps. This is exactly how over 4 million Africans were brought over in the bellies of ships to be the workforce. It starts by changing the policies, changing the media, and then ultimately changing the laws and normalizing this. So to my brothers and sisters that are veterans, you need to take a moment to read the sections on the Veterans Administration, to understand what's coming. I'm not trying to scare you. I'm trying to educate you so you can know. And for all of those talking heads that are on TV or on the internet, don't believe them. Just simply read it. Read it for yourself. I stopped in the education portion after the third sentence where it said, we are going to gut the Department of Education. It was literally clear. We're going to gut it. It says it. Read the Veterans Affairs and Veterans Administration section, and you'll be appalled.
And I'm going to go to Reverend Diane. And the Veterans Administration, I think, is like 44, either 44 or 47 pages. Read it. I read it. Let's talk about that because you work with the homeless, Reverend Diane. How would this affect all of these people that's getting veteran benefits, retirement? Will this affect their retirement also?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And they'll be out on the street and they don't care. All of us are going to have to do double duty to care for those of our own. But my big push is don't let this happen. This is why when I say let's talk about media, I know what they're doing. I want to know what we should be doing. Shame. We should use the word shame every single day on even the thought. And we should shame the men who wrote this, most of whom are Catholics. It's a shame. This is a shameful document. We have to have a wide variety. How did they get Make America Great Again? Let's figure out some words that we can use. A mantra that we say over and over and over again. I just use shame right now. And most veterans are on disability of some form. Mm-hmm. My nephews and niece work in that area, and they're scared to death because they get maybe 15 calls a day to take care of veterans, and they're very good. The money is there for them now, and they get very good services. But not only that, they'll lose their jobs. If there are no networks, if there's no network to care for someone, and that is taken up, it's almost like having your brain excised The country will be excised. And there will be those of us who are out. So that's a shame. That's shameful.
Let me ask you this, because there's so many questions coming in the chat. We're gonna have to come back because it's just so much. What about the Caucasian women that is supporting Trump? I'm gonna get this to Richard Rose and then go, because he like, what about these women that is supporting Trump? They'll die for Trump. Tell me.
You know, it's a good question. When as I became more involved on a daily basis in civil rights, I started reading books on oppression. The first book I read on oppression was about white women being oppressed by their husbands and fathers. And they carried this oppression on and superimposed it on the rest of us, their own agreement for economic reasons to be oppressed. Then they expect the rest of us to get there. There are only two objectives to oppression. That is deprivation and degradation. Deprive your resources and take away your self-worth. And so what we cannot allow ourselves to be normalized by their acceptance of oppression versus what we have to do. Let's be clear on all of these changes start with the change in the tax system when you stop taxing the wealthy. You know, we all learn Christians, to whom much is given, much is expected. They want to say, to whom much is given, they want more. Give them more.
Yes, that's right. Prosperity gospel.
So it is, now let's be clear. White suburban women voted more for Trump twice, 16 and 20, twice. Let's be clear. And so we education, I think, talking about these issues, we must put the matters with full conversation, full explanation, full exposure, hoping that the message will get around. And, you know, we've had these problems before. You know, we hit the streets in the 60s. You know, we had to convince people why it was necessary to take this individual sacrifice, because no, it didn't directly benefit us, but in the long run, it benefits. It benefits the community, and when rising tide lifts all boats.
Do you think the Evangelicals is the worst right now?
Evangelicals?
Yes.
See, the evangelicals have been around all the time. Remember, when they were burning crosses on Stone Mountain, those were the deacons and in their churches, in their Christian churches, in their Catholic churches, in their Baptist churches. Those same evangelicals, they have no relationship to the Christianity that I understood growing up.
You're right.
So absolutely, they are the bane of America. They've been like that. And the proof of it, I remember when Reagan was running for president against Jimmy Carter, the evangelicals picked a guy who never went to church over a guy who taught Sunday school every Sunday. That's how Christian they are.
What you want to say, Attorney Griggs? Because you want to say something. You got to say something about that. Come on.
You know, the easiest way to realize if somebody really does believe in the Christ is that they act Christ-like. And if you are more in tune with removing free lunches from schools than educating the children, by their fruits shall you know them.
Right.
And so what I would just simply say is, you know, Jim Jones had Kool-Aid. I don't know what folks are drinking right now, but what I also know is an imperative on us to make sure the truth is put clearly in front of them. And then for all, because here's what we're talking about. This is a minority group in America. Americans really do believe in life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and they want to see all Americans prosper. So we just got to spread the message loud enough and pull the sheets off of these individuals, put out their crosses, douse their tiki torches, strip off their khaki pants, and show them to the world who they really are, similar to what I did with Richard Spencer in 2015. Because it's important for them to understand they don't believe in true American values. Richard Spencer, who was the leader of the alt-right, this is 2017, I'm sorry, when we were on American Race, said to my face and Charles Barkley's face that life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness were the F word. He said, I don't believe in that. And so if you understand that it's individuals like him that want to build a white ethno state in America, this is what is happening. And so, as Richard said, for the suburban housewives, I'll tell them similar to what I told Richard Spencer. Well, y'all can continue to do what y'all doing, but the future of America is brown and black. And your grandchildren are going to be brown. So you might as well understand that we are building an America for everybody. And there's room for everybody in this experiment that is called American democracy. But if you like autocracy and you like a monarchy or you like an oligarchy, America is not for you. And some of us swore an oath to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of Georgia, and we take that very serious.
I wanted to chime in on the white women, if I can.
Okay, come on.
And I'll make it real quick and real to the point. Okay. One thing that I find amazing is that the 54% of white women who voted for Trump, it looks like they're going to come back out again and vote for Trump. But here's what they don't understand is that of these white women, here's the thing that you need to know. Most IVF treatments are white women. Most IVF treatments, unfortunately, do not result in pregnancies. I mean, to full-term pregnancies. And these treatments require a DNC. Many of these DNCs are performed at abortion clinics. These same women who are claiming that they want to support Donald Trump will have to not be able to freeze their eggs, or they won't be able to use donor embryos. They won't be able to use donor eggs. So the things that a lot of these women are using in their own fertility, they won't be able to do anymore. And this is in Project 2025, and no one's talking about it. So I believe that, unfortunately, white women overwhelmingly vote against their conscience, and, you know, God bless them. I can only do some.
That's going to be the next story. We got 20 minutes, but let me ask you this. Why is it, and I'm going to start with Attorney Griggs and go, why are Blacks supporting the Republican agenda and Project 2025 when this going to affect them also? Tell me, Griggs, why?
Well, again, as the president of the NAACP, I'm not going to go directly to that point. But what I will say is there's a certain individual who's been on television for 40 years and understands messaging and how to make something appear as though it's happening when it's not. You know, our polling, internal polling has shown that that candidate's favorability has not gone up in the Black community. We are having intensive conversations throughout the Black community and not seeing a rise in support. What we are seeing is a rise in the inability to understand how important the vote is, and people were choosing the couch. Now, hopefully, given the events that have happened in the last 72 hours or so, that will change. But let's be clear, Amber Rose and Waka Flocka and others are not pushing Black people to vote for anybody against their interests. One thing I do know about Black folks, we typically do not vote against our interests. We may not vote at all, but we're not going to vote for oppression.
Okay. Reverend Diana.
Well, I I have a sense, going back to the voting, that white women are quite oppressed by their marriages. That they vote according to what their husband believes because they want to stay in that marriage. They're very patriarchal. And in terms of separating their minds, you don't find that very much. White women marry people that are politically connected to them, and it's comfort. If you go against it, you lose your house, you lose your income, and you might lose your children. So they're just not going to go that far. But the consequences, I mean, I think they're dumb. They're just not thinking. They don't think for themselves. They think what their families, what the overall community or the culture thinks. And how do you break that? I don't know.
Okay. All right, Miss Barnes.
What was the question again? I'm sorry.
Why is it so many Black people supporting this Republican agenda in Project 2025? This question ain't gonna get you in trouble, is it?
Probably. Half of what I say gets me in trouble, so it's totally fine. I'm used to
it. I want to keep Attorney Griggs out of trouble, but if it,
it is what it is. It is what it is. I mean, someone is probably streaming this and taking screenshots right now. That's my life. All right, let's get to this. I agree with Gerald mostly, because there's a couple of things with this voting block. One is the fervor we're hearing on social media and the podcasts, and I think there needs to be a psychological evaluation before people can buy a podcast mic. I do too. There's something going on with this whole podcast thing. I don't know what's happening. And then the next thing is the actual electoral data, the data at the end of the election. And those data do not seem to correspond with a huge spike in crossover in the Black community. Now, we get a lot of conversation around it. And unfortunately, now that we have a Black woman presumptive candidate for the Democratic nominee for the Democratic candidacy, we are seeing some glimmers of misogyny war pop up. We are seeing this, I will never let a Black woman lead me type of thing. And this is what's wrong with Black women now. They always want to be in control. And it's like, sir, are you even registered to vote? And then with those type of conversations, I'm not as baited as I used to be. I mean, you all will be very proud of me, but I just find, I say, well, let's go to the Department of Defense and let's see what they're trying to do with Project 2025 and Department of Defense. I remember so many Black people were in the streets marching against cash bail all over the country. And I'm talking from Juneau, Alaska. Yeah, there were organizers in Juneau, Alaska, marching against cash bail, all the way down to Florida. And that overwhelmingly impacted Black people. They're not going to give that up. They're not going to give that up. And I think it's time to really start reshifting the conversation when we're talking about Black people who want to cross over. There's always going to be a population of knuckleheads that are just going to believe what they want to believe. I mean, they're going to believe what they want to believe. And this is not a Republican Democrat thing, but we're going to call it what it is. Overwhelmingly, the Black community as a bloc, as a voting bloc, was more progressive leaning because progressive policies more aligned with the actual lived experiences of Black people. Okay. It's not that we are bamboozled by the Democrats. It is that, hey, Black people actually don't like having to come out of their pocket $1,000 because they were driving on a suspended license. We don't like that. It destroys our entire life. It was Democrats who made those policies. So I think that I said I was going to be short. I'm not. Really quick, 2 seconds. I think there is what we're hearing on social media and what's going to be in our exit poll data. And I don't think our exit poll data is going to show a big change in that electorate.
Okay. Richard, Mr. Rose, I'm gonna ask you, why is Black folks supporting the Republican agenda and Project 2025?
Well, I don't think, first of all, I don't think it's such a groundswell of support. I think that's media overhyped by certain media outlets. That's the first thing I think. But clearly, the Project 2025 is 922 pages. Those of us on this panel will read it because, you know, we're used to reading stuff. You know, I'm a CPA by profession. I have to read every year when Congress comes out with these new tax laws. But the majority of people will not read it. And so when they're hearing snippets, they hearing abbreviated cliff notes. And so they don't get the whole information. Again, we have to educate and we have to engage about these things so that people understand. You know, we learned that familiar messengers are able to convey the message better than unfamiliar messages. So we got to be the familiar messages with the right message. This is nothing new. You know, I had debates as a high schooler why we should go downtown and picket the Goldsmith department store, why it made a difference, you know. And so Gerald Griggs and I caught lots of pushback when we attacked these Confederate monuments. But now I think much of America understands the military has now changed the names of all of those military installations that were named for Confederate leaders. And so this is a start. We have to know what's right, speak what's right in order to educate our community. It's our responsibility.
I'm not going to get Attorney Griggs in trouble. You stay right there, Richard Rose. I'm going to come to you. We got 10 minutes. I'm going to go to Reverend Diana.
Yeah.
Do you think President Biden should challenge the latest rulings of the Supreme Court before he leave office?
Absolutely. And I think they need to have a plan for expanding the Supreme Court, and it needs to be part of the Democratic platform.
Okay.
That's the only way that justice will be served in the United States.
Well, I agree with that too, because clearly, let's remember, the fact that judges are appointed for life is not in the Constitution. That's something Congress passed, that there are 9 justices. That's not in the Constitution. We can change that. And it doesn't take a constitutional amendment, right, Gerald?
That's correct. And so, I mean, I won't get in trouble for answering that because I just put on my lawyer hat.
Put on your lawyer hat.
Outside of what's in the 4 walls of the document, the Constitution of the United States, those things are not there. And so what we can do, you can expand the court. You can, appoint more justices with the advice and consent of the Senate. You can get rid of the filibuster rule. There's nowhere in the Constitution does it say you have to have a filibuster rule. Nowhere in the Constitution does it say the Senate has to be the deliberative chamber. There are 2 chambers. It has to pass both chambers. It could be a simple majority. If we had done those things, we wouldn't have the 3 justices that sit on the Supreme Court right now that are rewriting precedent that stood for 50 to 60 to 70 years. And so I think that it's time for both candidates to recognize the power of the actual Constitution. And that's the thing that frustrates so many in the third co-equal branch, because now you have individuals at the highest level in the third co-equal branch who are acting political. I thought the law was the law. If Roe was the law of the land, it's the law of the land. Just like now Brown is the law of the land. But now if Roe can fall, what makes you think Brown can't fall?
okay.
So, you
Brown-
know,
Plessy could fall.
you know, all
Lefty
these, we
can
can,
fall,
again,
Brown can fall.
all they have to do is put up a case that allows these particular justices to do what they want to do. But I'm gonna dip back into my NAACP hat, put that back on. We had a legion of lawyers: Thurgood, C.B. King, Donald Lee Hollowell, Fred Gray. So just like they're putting up cases before the Supreme Court, we should put up cases, because there is an important dichotomy to some of the race-based rights.
Yes.
We have 2 amendments, and so it's in the Constitution. So when we're having this conversation about DEI and affirmative action and all, those are in the Constitution. You know, you cannot have racial discrimination, period. And so I think what needs to happen in this next election is a plan to address the issues that are happening on the Supreme Court.
Okay. Now let me ask you, because we down to like 10 minutes, I want to ask this question. What about the electoral college system? Should it be changed or just gotten rid of?
I think
I
the
thi-
thing
Go ahead.
is that for Gerald or for me? I don't.
Come on, you give us 1 minute. Do you think it should be changed or gotten rid of?
No, I think that we need to have more transparency with redistricting.
Okay. What about you, Reverend Diana?
Well, I would get rid of it.
Okay.
Popular vote.
Okay. Attorney Griggs, what you think?
You know, I go back and forth with this one. I can see the usefulness of the Electoral College when it's used correctly. It does not allow for a majority to run amok on the country, but then I also see how it's been misused. So I think there needs to be some amount of reform. I don't think that the smaller states that don't have the population size should determine the outcome of presidential elections, but I also think they should have a voice. So I think the winner should come from a mixture of the popular vote and the Electoral College. There should not be a way for a person to lose the popular vote but be the president of the United States. Because let's be clear, taking my NAACP hat off for a moment, we wouldn't be having this conversation if it was straight popular vote. It would be clear that a certain individual would not even be running.
Okay. What about you, Mr. Rose?
I think it's time for the Electoral College to go. We know that it has been misused by states that formerly belonged to the Confederate States of America. We got several states that don't have the population of Collier Heights in Atlanta, but they have a collective about a dozen electoral votes. You got Alaska, you got Wyoming, you got the 2 Dakotas, you got Montana. You know, we can put all those people over at the park near Washington Park, because they just don't have, but they have so much influence on who gets to run this town. This country. It was. I think it was a compromise at the time. At a time when there was just very few states, right? We're talking about 13 colonies. Now that we have this expansion, we need to rethink all of these issues, and maybe some compromise, as Gerald said, might work. But clearly, as it stands now, I think it should go.
Okay, it's 7:29, and I can sit here and talk to you all day about it, because we still didn't hit a lot of the stuff. I'm going to be sending you guys an email, and we're going to come back. I'm going to talk to the producer, and I'm going to ask her, can I have Richard Rose on, each one of you guys on, and just hear from you guys, and then we can go from there, because it's so much that need to be said and done, because this is crucial, and we got to educate our people. I believe, now this is what I believe, and I'm going to go on Facebook Live here shortly after this. I believe every pastor that is standing behind a pulpit,
That's right,
need to have folks in their churches to educate the folks about Project 2025. I believe that. also, come on.
Yeah. That's all right. Finish what you're saying.
You like what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I believe they also need to educate the people on how important this election is of this year. I believe that this is going to be sink, swim, or die.
I do
And,
too.
and whatever affect us after November, it's going to affect us for probably some time. And
30
we
years.
don't get, and I believe, Griggs, if we don't get this thing right, I won't be around to see it. You won't be around to see it. And what we're doing now is really laying the foundation for your baby, my son, my grandkids when they come. Because see, if we don't do it, who else is going to do it? Because right now we need to pass the torch on to folks and educate our folks. You can agree to disagree with me, but I want to thank all you guys for coming. Thank you guys so much.
Can I say one last thing?
Yes.
One last thing? Sure,
Yeah.
I'll be sure. Everybody knows some teenage influencers. And I think that all of this needs to be put in their pocket, and they need to start focusing on the ways that they influence and use this information to that is key for them, to have them put it all over their social media and TikTok and all the crazy stuff they do, because they have millions and millions and millions of views.
Okay.
And really quick.
I'm going to let you give a closing statement after.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. Are you through, Reverend Diana?
I'm done. I'm done.
Okay. Ms. Barnes.
I was going to say, please follow me on all of my social media platforms. I'm Kenyette Tisha Barnes on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. And I have launched a series called #WTF is Project 2025, where I go through the actual document and I talk about the different agencies and what people need to know about this document in preparation for this November election cycle.
Put it in the chat box so we can put it on. Attorney Griggs.
Yes, similar to everybody else, follow me on all social media platforms, and we have to get out the vote. It's incumbent upon us to get out the vote if there ever was a time for us to get out the vote. And so if you know a registered voter, if you're not registered to vote, please make sure you get registered to vote. Check your status on the My Voter page, mvp.sos.ga.gov, and let's have a plan to mobilize, because as everyone has said, this election is not for me. This election for my daughter and my son, because I will not have them ask me when I'm very old, because I'm old now, but when I'm very old, why I didn't get out there and fight in this election, because this election is about their agency, both of them. And so think about your grandchildren, think about your children, make sure you vote, follow us on all social platforms. And I agree. I know there's a few people that have teenage influences in their house. TikTok about Project 2025.
Absolutely. Mr. Rose.
Amen to all of them. We got to vote. Democracy is at stake, is in peril, and we have to engage. We have to educate. We have to involve. We have to be active. As Gerald said, this is for the grandchildren and great grandchildren. We have to act now.
Thank you. Thank you guys for coming. Like I said, I'm going to do a Facebook Live. And when I go Facebook Live, I can do it the way I want to do it. It's going to be uncut and unfiltered. Nothing but the truth. And Richard Rose know me. Again, I want to thank you guys for coming. Be looking for an email. Give me to this weekend. I got some engagements that I'm going to do, but give me until this weekend. And hopefully we can kind of get together. I want to thank you guys for coming. Have a great day, and I think it was a great show.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.